The Pokegods really want this video to happen because I was thinking about it yesterday, and then this morning it just started pouring rain. I got in not too long ago. I was absolutely soaked. So I feel like I'm in the best headspace to accurately mine some sort of useful perspective on this interesting, chaotic idea, which had its origins in a YouTube comment. Actually, a couple of YouTube comments. I think people have been asking for this one for a while, so sorry. But yeah, it's a great idea, of course, because it's not like you're unleashing Groudon and Kyogre into OU, because Ninetales and Politoed are not good Pokemon. But the idea of their presence automatically means Dugtrio gets banned. That is number one. That, I think, Doug cannot exist. If Gen 5's Weather Wars have taught us anything, it's that, they're pretty nasty to begin with, but once trapping enters the picture, it's just horrible. Absolutely appalling. And I think it would be a very unhealthy dynamic, because here you have Dugtrio removing 2 of the 3 weather setters, and, even Politoed would not be Doug-proof, because it needs to run, like, bold max to not take a billion from Bandit Earthquake. And, switching it in can be tricky, of course. But I think it's just not going to be a good dynamic. You're going to have all sorts of stupid stuff going on. The most obvious is removing the T-Tar with Doug. Because T-Tar kind of gets baited in by, half the tier. That's T-Tar switches in a lot. It's already the best Pokemon. So this kind of strategy already kind of exists in Gen 3. You bait in T-Tar, and then you dug it and remove it, and then you change the weather with something like a Rain Dance Zapdos, so you can enable your Suicune. So yeah, and imagine that, but with permanent weather involved. That's horrible. And of course the removing Ninetales thing with Doug sniping it, that's really nasty. And, you would even, I guarantee you'd start seeing stupid stuff like people trying to trap each other's Dugtrio so they can get the upper hand with their own weather. And I don't mean in the sense of, I'll bait it out with Heracross or something and lock it into Aerial Ace so that my Dugtrio can then finish it off safely. I mean in the sense of, I'm going to run like Endor Salic Dugtrio, which is not reliable. So yeah, I have to say that Doug cannot exist in this. So it's gone. That's the first thing that happens, right? So now permanent weather. Permanent weather is or permanent rain and sun. So the first thing that comes to mind is that this is not too dissimilar from a current form of advance, which is weatherless. Because that exact strategy I was talking about. Whether it's planned or whether it's not planned, the first thing about Sandless Advance is that Snorlax and especially Suicune suddenly become among the most unkillable forces in the game. I went on about this for a while in the Skarmory possibly better than T-Tar video I did a few weeks ago. And the basic idea is that there are a lot of Pokemon which are good in and out of sand. Like Zapdos likes being in sand because it means its checks get worn down more, but it likes being out of sand because it gets lefties. Salamence, similar thing. But Suicune and Snorlax are not like that. And Suicune in particular, with permanent rain. So not only does it have free leftovers, like Sandstorm is the thing keeping Suicune from running over everything. And, not just taking that away very easily, but giving its water move a boost too, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. We're going to be seeing a lot of Vaporeons. Yeah, that's a real nasty proposition. Just, I don't want to knee-jerk too hard and go, well, Suicune would be banned too, because there'd be a lot of other crazy stuff going on. But yeah, it would be pretty nuts. Snorlax to a lesser extent as well. But at least Snorlax, because you can actually see this in Advanced Ubers, where Lax does extremely well outside of, when it's not being battered away at with permanent sand. In the Groudon Kyogre metagame, the Groudon Kyogre Lottie Twin metagame, I should say, Snorlax does great. But, that's mostly when it's being tasked with not taking stab, fire, or water moves under their respective weathers. Which here, Snorlax dealing with Suicune is a lot harder. But obviously this goes a long way for Lax as well. The main thing about Rain and Sun is that they are, of course, going to be special attackers. And that's not just good news for Snorlax and Regice, of course, for similar reasons, or the exact same reasons as Lax, I should say. But also Blissey, because Blissey functions just great in Sand for the same reasons as something like Zapdos and Mence. Blissey's hit by spikes, but it also has instant recovery, and it takes so little from these attacks. But it's also going to be taking so little from most of these attacks. I say most of because, yes, things like Sunny Moltres, Fire Blast are going to threaten it, of course. Yeah, things like that. Not only is Blissey going to stonewall you, but it's also getting recovery while doing it. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Like, for example, again, Suicune. Sub-Calm Mind Suicune, the whole reason why Weatherless Suicune is tough to pull off is because it's difficult to reliably remove the weather and maintain it, obviously. Because the whole, sacrifice something to T-Tar and then kill it with Dugtrio, you're building your team a very specific way. You're often going to have a lot of holes dealing with a lot of the metagame just because you're going so all-in on the Suicune strategy, because Suicune really does need that all-in factor. But with when you can replace the weather this easily, then yeah. The one thing is going to be that Politoed and especially Ninetales really don't do anything defensively. So they are going to make team building harder. And I think that's going to be the saving grace for why they don't wind up broken entirely. Because, let's say you want to use a Politoed Suicune, right? There's your two water types, which is fine, but one of them is kind of not doing much. What's Politoed doing? It can help check Mixments, kinda. If it has Refresh, it can check Moltres. Actually, Refresh would probably be one of the best things about it, switching into Swampert and stuff. But again, you're going to start running into issues really quickly against things like Zapdos and Celebi. So, I think without Dugtrio around, it'd be okay. For the most part, of course. It is one of those things. It's like U-turn. It's such a drastic change. It's hard to really wrap your mind around the full extent. One of the reasons I picked this replay with the Salic Heracross is that would be an underrated, something that you wouldn't think about at first, but then you would realize, oh, wait, this actually goes crazy. And Salic Heracross in particular is a great example because what's the number one thing that holds back Salic Heracross? Well, Mega Horn accuracy, of course, but also the fact that sand is everywhere, right? And Heracross teams, they can't afford to do that all in on removing T-Tar and changing the weather thing. They're like, we change the weather with our Magnetons if we can. You can't rely on it consistently. And with weather, with Ninetales and Politoed, then you can do that, way more consistently. And the best part about it is that these, like we just said, Politoed, Ninetales not contributing too much to a team, right? So it's going to make team building a little awkward. Now, Heracross is not going to be fixing anything in that regard, but what it does do is it makes up for that lack of defensive utility. It's one of those few sweepers where you say, okay, well, I'm going to be a little compromised against so-and-so early in the game, but it's going to be worth it, because when Heracross sets up, it does win the game on the spot if you do it right, as opposed to something like a DD Mence, which, can be checked by the opponent still having, decent health on their Pokemon, for example, or even something as scary as DD Tar. They don't quite have that outspeed and destroy everything against a decently bulky, decently healthy team factor that Heracross has. So I think Heracross would be an extremely popular Pokemon on these kinds of teams. You can even bait it. Well, I guess if we're not baiting in Dugtrio, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that fully. But yeah, Heracross also, in general, gets a lot better if there's no Dugtrio around. So, half of this would just be the consequences of a Dougless metagame, But yeah, you really do not want Doug around in this. Some people think Doug is too much in advance as it is, and if you introduce permanent Sun and Rain. So the obvious other thing would be, the speed boosting abilities, Swift Swim, Chlorophyll. Now, Chlorophyll, not going to be too scary. I mean, it's okay, but I'll put it this way. People have tried Exeggutor and OU before. It's actually pretty good, but none of its good sets involve Sunny Daying. You know why? Because you can't fit all the moves you want on it. You need your Grass Stab, and then you want HP Fire, so you're not walled by... first of all, Sun boosted HP Fire is even better than it would usually be with coverage alongside Grass. But you can't afford to not afford to be walled so brutally by something like Celebi and all the steals out there. But then where's your move for Salamence? You're completely bricked by it. You can run Psychic if you're Exeggutor, so what's your moveset? Sunny Day, 3 special attacks. I mean, it's okay, but Exeggutor has so many other good moves. It has Sleep. It's got Explosion. So the Chlorophyll sweepers are going to be really compromised because there's no Chlorophyll Venusaur. I mean, unless you want to go the whole 9 yards and just, introduce... No, that's too far. You can't introduce every hidden ability into Gen 3. Then it starts getting a little crazy, especially because what that means. That also means Solar Power Charizard, and I don't think we're ready for that. Yeah, Chlorophyll Venusaur would obviously help, but actually, no, I take it back. It wouldn't, because Sludge Bomb is a physical attack in this generation, so it's got the same Giga Fire issue. Yeah, and Grass Fire, already great coverage, of course, and you got the speed and the boost to HP Fire, but I can't really see it being overwhelming. And Sun teams, I think, are more going to be for Fire type, so they're not going to be about speed as much. I mean, look, maybe chuck Agility on Moltres, you have more incentive to do so now. And I mean, Moltres Charizard are going to be terrifying pokes, of course. But I also think that Ninetales, I mean, again, it's the bet. You know what Ninetales does? Ninetales is going to be a good Pokemon on physical offense. Number one, it clears sand so that your Heracross or whatever can exist more freely, or Snorlax. Number two, you know what it does? It switches into Gengar's Will-O-Wisp. And teams need this. Switching into Gengar's Will-O-Wisp and setting up Drought, hey, that's really good. And what Drought does is, as opposed to going in on all Sunsweeper Chlorophyll stuff, it boosts fire moves a lot better, so you are able to pressure Skarmory more easily. Like, for example, if you have something like a DD Fire Blast T-Tar, then, which is not a great set, but maybe now it is, because Sunny Fire Blast threatens Metagross a lot more instantly than Skarm. So it's not even just Skarm. Just being able to threaten Skarm and Metagross more instantly with fire coverage in Sun helps you break through it better, so there's less need for Magneton. You can run Fire Blast Snorlax to greater effect. All sorts of stuff. So I think that would be a greater application of Sun. Now, Rain, especially because you want these teams to not be blanked by Blissey. And again, Blissey is already arguably broken in Gen 3. I am going to make a video on that. But when these boosts are being thrown at Blissey and it's healing, and you're gonna, and there's no Dugtrio around to get rid of Blissey. But at the same time, I don't really love the idea of banning Dug and then banning Blissey. I think even if you take out the whole Sun Rain thing, then you don't have to do that. Simply because the Pokemon that deal with Blissey are often also Dugtrio prone. But it does really make running special attackers harder already, than it already is. So, I don't know, there'd be a lot of adjusting to be done. But for Bliss, it's... yeah, that's always going to be your biggest issue. It can be done, of course. Beat up Charizard would be even more popular than it already is, I'm sure, for this specifically. That's another video to make, of course. But... yeah, I think the Swift Swim stuff is going to be more reliable because the same weather that boosts the Swift Swimmer's speed also boosts their stab. And the Chlorophyll Grass types don't have that. And a Kingdra is a great Pokemon. Ludicolo is a good Pokemon. And Omastar is the worst of the Swift Swimmers because it's half rock typing, brings a lot of nasty weaknesses. Its special defense is horrible. Things like that. But if the Rain is automatic, it's suddenly a lot more attractive a prospect because it doesn't need to take that turn to set up Rain manually. and it's just automatically blasting with the strongest hydro pumps in the game. So, yeah, I think because rain teams are already good. I think there are a lot of really good ways to run Kingdra, for example. Those teams aren't really. I mean, they can be quote unquote true rain teams, but they can also just be good special offense teams with the Rain Dance Kingdra tacked on. Maybe you tack on Rain Dance onto your Suicune just because it's a good move to have for a lot of reasons. See, again, weather clearing while boosting your stab. It's a good thing. But with permanent rain, then it's a lot nastier of a prospect, of course. And I mean, Politoed definitely is going to have some use defensively. It can switch into Metagross. I mean, you don't want to get boomed on by Metagross with Politoed, and then lose your weather advantage. But it does switch into Metagross, of course. It doesn't mind switching into T-Tar. It heals, not in sand, but it replaces the sand, of course. You can deal with Ments okay-ish. Not great, but okay-ish. Yeah, it's not like you're tossing on something with zero defensive utility at all. Yeah, I think Aerodactyl is something that takes a hit from this because Aero really, really loves having. Well, I don't think Aero needs sand. It needs one of sand and spikes. I think Aero sand with no spikes is fine, but that I get in this new metagame, not really. So yeah, I think a lot of these teams are really frail against Aero in general, so maybe its usage goes up. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm a little tired, so I'm definitely. I mean, let me know in the comments, of course, what I'm overlooking, as I'm sure it's a lot. But I mean, I think this is. You can kind of see shades of this in the weather clearing strategies that have been used by so many players. Like I'm looking at Ments on the screen right now, and I'm thinking of players who have used Sunny Day Salam. Does it get Sunny? It gets Rain Dance, I think. I'm pretty sure. I've seen people run Rain Dance Ments because Mixed Ments famously has some free slots, so you can experiment with it a lot. And yeah, I think. You know what else you might see? You might see manual weather more, just to like you could see Sunny Day on Salamence, for example, just to disrupt Politoed switching in. It wouldn't even be about abusing the weather yourself so much. It'd just be about messing up the opposing sun and rain. Because I mean, think about it like this: you KO the opponent's Politoed because your T-Tar is down or whatever, and they're like, "Yes, perma rain, Kingdra's gonna win," and then you Sunny Day, and oh, never mind. It does make you very careful about running offense, though. Like really frail offense teams, because there's not that much priority. Kingdra takes priority really well anyway, because it's so bulky. And it's they get cleaned up really hard by it, and there's very little to be done about it. Like your average physical offense team, I guess Snorlax gets more in the way of longevity, but you really got to be careful. Because rain teams are going to be ready to pick these kinds of squads off, at a moment's notice. And, there are other ways you can also make up for the lack of defensive utility in your. I mean, this is already a tactic on some rain teams, for example. But Breloom's Spore, the ability to take something out of the game so decisively, that's really good to make up for the fact that you're playing, a Pokemon down in the case of Ninetales or sometimes Politoed. So, and it's just a good way to get out in front. In general, for offensive teams that don't have the ability to switch around 6 opposing Pokemon, then you go, okay, well, I'm going to take one of those Pokemon out of commission almost automatically with Spore. And so you kind of, you would try something similar to compensate for that, that kind of ugly slot on your team where you got the Pokemon that is there for the weather but isn't really that good in its own right. So, and maybe you see more Lumberries. Hey, I mean, you could arguably see more Lumberries in general because you no longer need less lefties to not auto die to sand. So you could run extra Lum for that and without being punished as severely. So yeah, I think this would be a large extrapolation from current weather change strategies that already exist. The Pokemon of concern are really Suicune and Blissey. Those are the biggest ones. but everything else I think would be manageable. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was useful for you, and I will catch you in the next one.